And we're live. Give everyone a few minutes to pop in. I'm a couple minutes late, but not much. Just say hi as you're popping in. I haven't really started yet. Yesterday, I talked a lot. Marlo, it's good to see you. Oh my gosh, how have you been? I'm wearing my pin for you today. Hope you're doing well. Hi, Paula. Good to see you back. So yesterday I talked extensively about different essential oils that I work with as far as, helping with inflammation in various forms. And today I'm going to continue the discussion about inflammation. I actually had another topic in mind, but then I thought after yesterday, I think I could continue it just a little bit further. So I'm going to do that. But before I start, what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of background for those of you who don't know me. As far as my, chronic illness journey is concerned. So what I thought about doing today was to kind of talk a little bit about the different diagnoses that I've received over the years that finally led up to, and I said finally because it took them years. It was kind of a relief when I got that diagnosis of lupus because I'd spent years trying to figure out why I was always so sick, right? So I'm going to give you kind of not necessarily a timeline because I don't think I put the dates or anything beside here as to when I received the diagnosis, but just to give you an idea of how far I've come from being really, really sick and having all of these diagnoses to the person you see sitting before you today. All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the background first, and then I'm going to go into a few other strategies to help with preventing inflammation as well as helping to relieve inflammation if you already have those kinds of issues. All right, so lupus was not my first diagnosis. I actually, and I mentioned this yesterday, that I learned that I had or I was a carrier of the sickle cell trait when I was about 16, which I know that's a little bit late to find out something like that, and it was kind of hard the way that I found it out, but I found that out, but lo and behold, it never occurred to me, and there was no further discussion about it until my third child was born, many, many years later. He's now 14. So that was, I guess, technically my first one. Then I was also diagnosed with hyperthyroidism when I was about 18, and I think at the time I weighed maybe 92 pounds. So I had a very, very overactive thyroid. I was very, very thin. And skip ahead a few years, I was then later diagnosed with asthma, which turns out later on was changed. They felt that I was misdiagnosed. And that diagnosis was then changed to COPD and emphysema. And there's a whole other story behind how that occurred. I was never a smoker, was very careful about being, around people that smoked, that sort of thing. But I can talk about that story at another time. But I have been diagnosed with emphysema, very mild case of emphysema. I was diagnosed with anemia from a very, very young age. I was diagnosed with pernicious anemia about 9 or 10 years ago. And if you're not familiar with pernicious anemia, it's basically where there's a missing, what they call an intrinsic factor, that's missing in the stomach that kind of helps to absorb B12. So that is missing from my stomach, my gut, so that basically I cannot absorb B12 from any foods. So I have to get a shot every month directly into the muscle, which helps with that. And if you're there, oh gosh, forgot her name now. There is a very famous, um, I want to call her an outlaw, a female outlaw who actually died from pernicious anemia. And that was the first time I was reading up on her story, and I'm going to find out her name. Annie, oh gosh. Anyway, I'm going to find out her name and I will post it. But I was at a wax museum and I was looking at her particular wax figure, and they gave you a little bit of her story, and I was reading it, and it said that she died from pernicious anemia, and it hit me because I had just been diagnosed with pernicious anemia, and that's when I realized just how serious that was. So I make sure every single month that I do go in and I get my B12 shot every month, because my stomach does not absorb the B12 from foods. So then shortly after that, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and several of you might be familiar with that because you probably have your own diagnosis. Usually when you get a diagnosis of lupus, there's a few other things that come along with it. You don't just get diagnosed with one autoimmune issue. There's several that decide that they want to join the club as well, so they kind of get piled on. And I know Marlo is watching, and she's one of the lupus warriors out there, and she can probably tell you that yes, lupus doesn't like to be lonely. It loves to have other autoimmune conditions kind of keeping it company. So there's a lot that you usually get diagnosed with when you get an autoimmune condition. So fibromyalgia was one. Then I also got diagnosed with diverticulosis, which is a gut, or I want to say maybe a large intestine condition. Of course, lupus, I've mentioned that before. A few years ago, I went to my doctor because I was really struggling to breathe and didn't know what was happening. So went to my doctor, finally got in to see him, and he checked my lungs, because remember I said I was diagnosed with emphysema, so he figured that might have been flaring up. So they did x-ray of my lungs and found out no, my lungs were fine. They weren't inflamed or anything apart from that, that part. So it wasn't my lungs. And then he said, well, we can't figure out what's going on. So he put me on top of the bed to kind of poke around and try to determine what was happening. And as he started poking this chest area, I started going, ow, ow, that sort of thing. And he finally realized that my ribs were extremely inflamed. And with every breath that I took, it literally was, when you inhale, your rib cage kind of opens up, and then as you exhale, it contracts, right? So with every breath, it literally felt like I was dying. And that's why I thought that it was my lungs, but it was actually my rib cage. Every soft spot, that allows for the expansion and contraction was swollen with inflammation. So of course that was a whole other diagnosis called costochondritis, if you're not familiar with it. Hello, Anne. That's my cousin right there. So costochondritis was thrown into the mix, and if it gets really cold, well, back in the day, if it was getting really cold, it got really hard to breathe. With every breath I took and the inflammation, it would just literally feel like I was dying. Then, of course, I mentioned the emphysema and COPD. A couple of years ago, I got diagnosed with ice pick headaches. And if you're not familiar with ice pick headaches, I'm sure that there's a much better medical term, but that's literally the easiest way for me to remember it. Ice pick headaches literally sounds that way. It's like somebody has an ice pick and they're stabbing you in your head. You never know when it's going to occur. It just comes on. It lasts for about 10 seconds. I scream and scream and scream, and then it goes away. Just like that. So there's no medicine that you can take for it. You never know when it's coming on. So I just kind of had to deal with it. And I haven't had an episode in probably about a year and a half. And they usually happen no more than maybe 3 a month. There are people that I've been told who have maybe 50 of these episodes a month. So they're clearly on some kind of medication to kind of, prevent the occurrences of it. Um, another diagnosis, I'm going to come to this one. Actually, let me talk about it now. Vitiligo. I actually received this diagnosis just over a year ago. And I'm sure you're familiar with vitiligo. It's basically where you're losing the pigmentation in your skin. But it wasn't all over. Most of mine was occurring on my thighs, inner part of my thighs, and on the top, the front part of my thighs as well. And that was kind of weird because I never expected that. But I was at a checkup with my doctor, and she asked, at the end of it, "You're looking really good. Everything is fine. Do you have any concerns?" And I told her, I said, "Well, I have these really weird white spots that have been appearing all over my legs." And she, of course, asked to see them, and she said, "It looks like you have a touch of vitiligo." And I'm like, "No, I don't." She said, "Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit, of that going on. But funny enough, they're dissipating. I don't know. I have some idea of why the white areas are kind of shrinking, but I'm hoping that they completely vanish after a while, right?" So the next one, can you tell I have received a lot? This is a long list of diagnoses, and that's why I wanted to go through these to kind of give you an idea of just how far I've come in the last few years based on everything that I've been mentioning here, right? So just before I received the diagnosis of lupus, I was sent to see a neurologist because of some symptoms that I was experiencing with numbness in my fingers and numbness in my feet and the constant tingling. And that also is a side effect of not being able to absorb B12, because if your B12 is lacking, then it causes all kinds of nerve conditions, right? So B12 is very, very important when it comes to your nervous system. But I was sent to see a neurologist, and that was, I think, a week before I actually received the diagnosis of lupus, because the neurologist was actually the one who recommended that I get tested for lupus because of everything that he saw going on. And that diagnosis was global sensorimotor polyneuropathy, which basically was saying, "Girl, your nervous system is shot." So, and there's a whole, tons of other stuff that I did to kind of help to heal my nervous system as well, because they got to a point where I couldn't walk on hot sand. I literally would burn my feet. I had to be very careful with being out in the sun. But now I go to the beach, I walk barefoot on the beach, I walk barefoot on the ground. I've come a long way as far as that is concerned. The tingling in my fingers is virtually non-existent. My feet, there was a time when I couldn't walk without it feeling like I was literally walking on like thumbtacks. Hi Morris, it's good to see you. So you can imagine just how painful that was, right? So that was another diagnosis. Then this one I received, I think about 15, well, the condition started about 15 years ago, but it wasn't really worked out until a few years ago. Inappropriate sinus tachycardia. A lot of you probably don't know, and I'll post a link below of a video that I did as far as that was concerned, about my experience with it. But I do have an implanted device in my chest. It literally looks like a USB, maybe about that size, but it's about the size of a USB, one of those little things, yes. So that's been implanted in my chest just above my heart. And it basically keeps a track of my heart rhythm. It's not a pacemaker, but it does track whatever, my heart is doing. And if it does any kind of crazy heart rhythms, then it's marked and sends a notification to my cardiologist. I also have to sleep beside a device that records everything at night. I have a handheld device that if I feel a particular symptom, then I have it and I just place it over and it goes, records it, gives a ding, and then I can also send that off to the cardiologist, right? So that's another one, inappropriate sinus tachycardia. And my cardiologist he's worked constantly over the last few years to try to figure out exactly what's causing the abnormal rhythm. But I think he's gotten to a point now where he's saying maybe it's just me. Maybe that's just my heart rhythm. But, sometimes it goes too fast, and I just like to keep as many of my heartbeats as possible. So we're working consistently on that, and there's some things that I do to try to minimize. I do exercise. Even though exercise does raise your heart rate a bit, I do exercise. So that's one of the things that's really critical for me as far as staying healthy. But let me continue. Tinnitus. I was diagnosed with tinnitus and mild hearing loss several years back. That is, they think it's as a result of having, so many conditions. We're really not sure why the tinnitus started. Some people tell me that it's just angels talking to me, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. That worked for me. It kind of, that kind of keeps me from, I guess, putting a negative tone around having the tinnitus anyway. It's not loud all the time, but July 4th, it gets pretty bad then because of all of the fireworks. So I do wear ear muffs around the 4th of July and a few days after, because, people kind of set off fireworks for days after the 4th of July. And then with lupus, of course, there's arthritis with the inflamed joints and joint pain and that sort of thing. There's been some mild kidney issues, very mild liver issues. And yes, those have been all of my diagnoses over the last few years. And that's pretty much what I've been healing my body from for the last number of years. So the person you see sitting in front of me, if you read the article that I posted yesterday that talked about my journey with lupus, and in there were some very graphic images of, because I did document what I looked like on a number of occasions. There are some pictures in there of, chronic bleeding gums, my feet when they would turn literally white because I would lose all the blood, fingertips turning white. There's a lot of, the journey was well documented in that article. So it was posted yesterday under the video I did yesterday. So if you'd like to know a little bit more or to see, because I know some people are visual and actually like to see. Another thing that I did not talk about, I said I was going to talk about that, was alopecia. About 5 years ago, I had a very large bald spot in the back of my head, and I would have to pull my hair back to kind of cover that up. Lupus did cause me to lose a lot of hair, and that is one of the main main symptoms that I know a lot of lupus patients have, is they develop a lot of sores in their scalp, and that's one of the things that caused me to lose my hair back then. But I did manage to regrow a lot of my hair. I don't have hair now, but I usually, and I actually was about to shave my head today, and I said, no, I'm going to wait because I want to talk about this first so you guys realize that I'm not lying about this. I did manage to regrow my hair using a particular essential oil blend, and so that bald spot that I used to have is not there. And I'm going to turn around so you can actually see. So hopefully you can see there's nothing. There's no bald spot anywhere, because I did manage to regrow my hair. The reason why I have, no hair right now is because about 3 years ago I did a fundraiser for St. Baldrick's, which is basically a childhood cancer research, and my youngest son and I, we both shaved our heads for that, and I had managed to grow my hair out quite a bit. So I did a video, and I also did an article that I discussed that in, so you can see just how much hair I actually shaved off. But right now, there's no bald spots in there, and I did manage to regrow my hair. Now, with some people who do have, have been diagnosed with lupus, and alopecia is one of their, I know some of them have found it impossible to regrow the hair simply because of all of the scarring concerns. So, but yes, that is, those are all of the diagnoses I've received over the years in a as much of a nutshell as I could tell you. So the person you're seeing before you has gone through a lot to heal my body in order to be the person sitting in front of you to tell you that it can be done. Right? It was a journey. It wasn't easy. It wasn't overnight. It was not an overnight thing. It has been several years. My diagnosis occurred, I think, 8 or 9 years ago. I think it was about 8 years ago, and I literally started months after to find out what it was going to take to heal from all of the symptoms that I was experiencing. So I said all of that to tell you that it is possible to heal from chronic illness. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely is. The work, all of the work that I put into this was definitely worth it, because I can come to you and I can say, you know, I know what you went through, I know what you're going through, I know that there is hope, right? So on that note, I'm going to give a little bit more, because, you know, yesterday we started talking about inflammation and how I used essential oils to kind of help with all of the inflammation that I was experiencing, right? And I shared with you a lot of different items that I created over the time, the past few years. So if you want to go back to watch that, what I'll do is I'll post the link to that video below this one, and that way you have a chance to watch that video as well. So inflammation, let's try that again. Other strategies that I've worked with to heal and to soothe inflammation, right? Lifestyle changes. One of the main things that I did, and I think I mentioned this before, was meditation. I have gotten to a point where I've literally been able to visualize inside my body. It wasn't an overnight thing, but I trained myself to, you know, whenever I feel something happening, I can go within and go to that particular area that is bothering me and talk to it, visualize what's happening. And what I basically do is ask my body, what are you trying to tell me? So I allow it to give me whatever wisdom, and then I work from that. So meditation is huge for me. Prayer, if you're Christian like I am, prayer is huge. Believe me, there's a lot of times that I cried out to God, like, why me? Because, you know, in my opinion, I mean, I wasn't perfect by a long shot, but I thought I ate pretty well, thought my diet was, you know, was decent. I exercised, I took care of my body, and then out of the blue, here comes this lupus thing, right? And so there are times when, like, prayer was one of those things that I use a lot. I don't think I've ever prayed so much as I did in the last few years. But it is an integral part of healing. If you don't have a spiritual life, I think when you're chronically ill, you develop one, because you call on whatever higher power that you're familiar with, whatever you've been raised with, and it does help to get you through. So prayer and meditation is huge for me. I mentioned exercise briefly. I'm trained in Taekwondo. I'm actually a black belt in Taekwondo, and so are my kids. But I did get to a point where I was so sick that I couldn't train for a while. But I'm back. I got back to where I could train. Did a lot of martial arts training. I was running again. I now run about 3.5 miles every day. And what other type of exercise do I do? Qigong. There's a couple Qigong challenges that I've done. Yoga. So movement is very important as well if you're trying to recover from a chronic illness, or trying to, you know, when I say recover, I truly mean heal, because I do believe that you can heal your body from chronic illness. Now, there wasn't just one thing. Like yesterday I mentioned essential oils, and it wasn't just one thing that actually helped me to heal. So I don't want you to think that, oh, you know, work with some essential oils and boom, the magic happens. Magic does happen when you're working with essential oils, but it's not just just the essential oils that I worked with. It was also other things, and you know, some of those that I'm mentioning. frequency music. And by frequency music, I'm talking about solfeggio frequencies. If you're not familiar with those, I'm going to post a link. There are different solfeggio frequencies, some of them ranging from helping with pain all the way up to connecting with a higher power, and in between, So I'm going to post a link below that will kind of give you an idea of what they are, and that explains them a little bit more, because I could talk about the solfeggio frequencies for about another hour. And if that's something you want me to do, then that's fine, but we won't do it here. But I am going to mention it, that solfeggio frequencies is something that I work with on a daily basis. There's some days when I play the frequency to alleviate pain, and there's some days when I play another frequency, which is kind of like, it basically kind of works on your entire body. It's basically kind of like a DNA reworking, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I'm going to put all of them and the links, and I'm going to put a short description of what each particular frequency does. And if you haven't started to work with sound frequency yet, that would be a good way to start. Okay. And then I mentioned essential oils yesterday. So different lifestyle changes, those are some of the ones that I work with, and I do this on a regular basis, on a daily basis. These are not things that I do maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks. These are integral parts of my day. Other things, when it comes to sleep, if you're dealing with a chronic illness, sleep is probably something that's been stolen from you, and I completely understand, because I've been there. Ways to kind of help with sleep is essential oils, which I mentioned yesterday, and I'm going to post that link so you're familiar with some of the ones that I mentioned. Okay. Another way to help with sleep is to kind of reduce the effects of electromagnetic frequencies, and that basically means if you sleep with your cell phone right beside your head, you probably don't want to do that anymore. If you sleep with your computer in your room, you may want to have a spot outside of your room, or maybe leave everything in the living room. Don't have electronics in your room, because all of the electromagnetic frequencies are basically bombarding your body. And there's enough research out there, and I'm going to let you go down that rabbit hole yourself to find out the effects of electromagnetic frequencies on our bodies. And I also did a video about that, so I can also post that in the comment section below, so you can kind of listen to that, and you can make your own decision about that as well. Okay. Another strategy, and this is a huge one, and this is something that we can all do, like starting right now, is dietary changes. The one thing that we can control right now is what we put into our bodies, right? And a lot of the times, the stuff that we're putting into our bodies is exactly what's causing the inflammation. So I know I've mentioned over and over, I think everyone needs to start to start to keep a food journal. And if you deal with any kind of chronic pain, one of the things that I found very helpful was writing down everything that I was eating, and then after a couple of hours I documented how I was feeling, because your body does talk to you. It does tell you how it's feeling after you feed it certain things, right? So start to keep a food journal, start to write down everything you're eating, and you can tell what food is bothering you and how it is bothering you. And if you're not sure, don't eat so many different things at one time. If there's something that you suspect might be bothering you, then go ahead and eat that by itself. See how you feel 30 minutes to an hour and a half later. And then if that's what's causing it, then remove that from your diet. Because food should be your medicine, and medicine should be the food that you eat. But with the standard American diet right now, we call it the SAD diet, and fast food, the way that it is, that you can just drive up and grab something, and that is not the solution. I know that we don't live in a perfect world. We're not perfect people. Every once in a while, that's okay. And I did it. There was, when I was working every Friday was pizza night for us. And I know that that's not a good thing, but we loved pizza. And sometimes we made our own, sometimes we ordered. But it's I'm picky. Even today, I can tell you what particular fast food restaurants to not ever go to. And I can also tell you the ones, if you have to go to a fast food restaurant, which one to go to. But again, that's a whole other discussion. But the bottom line is, you have control over what goes into your body, and that should be the first thing that you prioritize, is make sure that the food that you're eating is not causing you harm. Your diet, your food, your drink, it should be nurturing your body. It should be creating health in your body, not disease or dis-ease. Okay? So we should be eliminating as much processed food as possible. Things you need to be looking out for are things like artificial flavors, artificial colors. Limit your intake of dairy. I know that if I add a piece of cheese right now, I mentioned that I love pizza. Cheese is one thing that I eradicated from my diet. At least the dairy. I don't eat any cheese at all, but at the time when I decided to cut dairy, I did eat some goat cheese. That didn't bother me as much, but dairy does bother me. Limit your intake of sugar. We know what sugar does. That's a whole other discussion as well. I'm just throwing out, different ways that you can kind of start now to really help your body to heal, or to not to, if you're not in a disease mode, to prevent it from ever getting there, simply by making a few adjustments into your diet, into what you're eating. We know that we're bombarded with pesticides. One of the things I've done over the years is I've gone organic. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is definitely worth the price. And we know that pesticides don't, have borders. So sometimes if there's an organic farm and there's another farm over here that's not organic, we know that pesticides can travel. So, but I try to eat as organic as I possibly can. Buy organic, help those organic farmers out a little bit. See what else I wanted to mention. Oh, dyes. A lot of foods, a lot of drinks have these artificial dyes in them, and those can wreak havoc on your digestive system, on your entire body. So be careful of processed foods, the dyes, artificial flavoring, artificial coloring, that sort of stuff. Do you guys have any questions? I know I've been talking and talking and talking, but I want to make sure that I'm not overlooking anything. I don't see any questions or comments posted, so I'm just guessing that you all are just listening intently. But if you have any questions about anything that I've mentioned, I'm not going to go too long today, but I will gladly come back and answer any questions that you might have, either in the comments or in another live stream. I just wanted to post to let you know of just a couple other things that I do work with on a daily basis to help to keep my body healthy and to prevent any kind of flare-ups of any illnesses that I've been diagnosed with. I can talk about these in more detail if you do desire. So just post some questions or comments below, and then I will either do them I'll either answer them in the comment section, or I'll do another live on them. Okay, I hope that this has been helpful. I'm going to be coming live every day at the same time, just talking about different things related to how we can be healthy and boost our immune system. And here's one thing I do want to mention, that those of you if you have been diagnosed with lupus, I do want to make sure that you are working with your doctors. If you're making any kind of changes, like adding in essential oils or herbs or that sort of thing, make sure that you are working with your doctors, that they are aware of what you're doing, because I know that there are some essential oils that can interfere with your medications that you might be on. So make sure that your doctors are aware. Oh, one of the things I did forget to mention was, one of the things I became very aware of is that, I have a cardiologist, I have a gastroenterologist, I have a primary doctor, I have a nephrologist, the kidney specialist, what I'm trying to say is I have a whole team of doctors, but all of my doctors, they talk to each other because they realize that the body is not disconnected. Your heart is in your body and it talks to everywhere else in your body. Your liver is not disconnected from the rest of your body. Everything in your body is connected to each other, and they all have to work together to make sure that you're healthy, right? So whichever doctors that you have, make sure they talk to each other. That's one of the things that I do every time I go for a B12 shot. My gastroenterologist knows, and my cardiologist knows, and my primary doctor knows. They all talk to each other, and they all know what the other doctor is doing, because they all realize that the body is not dissected into different parts and they're not separated. We live in it's one body, and everything, all of our organs, they're housed in this one body. So we can't operate as if everything is separate. And that's what I really love about the team of doctors that I have. I also have an herbalist that I work with, in addition to I'm an herbalist myself, but the herbalist that I started to work with several years ago, she is also on my team. I also have a nutritionist on my team. So I have everybody that, kind of knows, hopefully, what they're doing. Hi, Siri. Good to see you. So if you do have any of these diagnoses, please do not make any changes to anything. Your medication, your diet, whatever, don't make any changes without consulting with your doctors, and make sure all of your doctors are aware of what you are doing, so that they're working with you. Because one of the good things that I love about my doctors is that they are very open to natural remedies. They're not. I did have one doctor years ago who when I mentioned that I wanted to try turmeric, he was like, I don't want to know. Nope. But this particular team that I have now, they are very open to working with natural remedies. But you do have to let them know that if you're going to be working with natural remedies or making any kind of changes, please let them know what's going on, because the last thing you want is for something to happen and then they say, well, what have you done differently? So be very open with them. Doctors aren't trained. They didn't go to med school to learn about nutrition. They didn't go to med school to learn about natural medicine. Some have added it on in recent times, but they're not trained for this. So if this is something you do want to get into, make sure that your doctors are aware that you want to go this route, and that you're trying out different things. Let them know. That's the only thing. That's my huge caveat right there. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop here. If you have any questions at all, please just post them. And if you have any questions about anything I've spoken about, please share them with me. I will gladly answer them, and I will, if it's going to take more than a short comment, then I will also do a live about it. I appreciate all of you being here. There are some familiar faces, people I went to school with. Love you guys. So glad to see you all. I even have family members that came to watch. So I do appreciate all of you being here. I'll be back tomorrow around the same time, 2:30 Eastern time, and I will post a comment about what time I'm coming and what I'm going to be talking about. But if there are specific topics that you want to hear me talk about, please share those with me as well, and I will gladly do so. See you all tomorrow, and I love you all.